Hello, may I have your attention, please? My name is Ron Reardon. I am an alcoholic. It's an honor, a privilege to introduce our main speaker tonight, which is Megan, and let's give her. Hi, Megan. How you doing?
I'm Megan. I'm a recovering alcoholic. Gosh, whenever I get asked to speak, I always wonder what I'm going to say. And my only prayer when I come up here is just for God to put words in my mouth and speak for me, because I have nothing of interest that's going to help anyone. So it all comes from my higher power. My upbringing is really quite boring. I grew up in an affluent neighborhood. I have two parents that were married until death did them part. They had a beautiful relationship. I can recall twice when they got in like a fight, and both times my mom went on a long walk. There is nothing in my childhood that I can blame for my alcoholism, even though I know that wouldn't make me an alcoholic anyway, but I don't have those experiences growing up. But what I do have is I never felt like I fit in. And I was always a chameleon. I was always able to blend in with any group of people. I could, I guess, dance and conform to whatever any group wanted. So I had a lot of friends, like a lot of friend groups. They were really close acquaintances. I played a lot of sports growing up, and that probably kept me from getting into more trouble in high school. I did drink in high school. I remember one of the first times I drank, I was on the East Coast at a tennis tournament, and we ordered a couple bottles of wine through room service and then pretended we were adults. We were traveling with my coach. I think we were 14 at the time, and we thought that was pretty risky. So I don't recall it being like this magical moment. I recall enjoying it, but it didn't have that instantaneous feeling of relief that I know some people talk about. As I got older, I went to college. I graduated high school. I went to college, and I had my first big consequence. I played sports in college, and I got arrested for an MIP during a big football game. And there were a lot of undergraduates at this university, and there were about 12 of us that played sports that got arrested. There were like 600 students in total that got arrested. And our names were put front and center of the newspaper for the university. And I was subsequently kicked off the tennis team for a couple months. I missed a couple of the matches. And I remember my dad saying to me, well, you just can't drink anymore. And I thought that was really crazy. And in my mind, I came to the conclusion that I don't really want to play tennis anymore. So I ended up quitting, transferring schools, and when I got to the next college, I remember before one of the football games, we were having a tailgate, and my dad handed me a shot of tequila. And he said, well, since you're not playing tennis anymore, I guess you can drink. And I took that to mean my life is over. I have no purpose. I have nothing left to live for, nothing left to offer, so I might as well just drink, right? Clearly, that is not what my father meant, but that is how I took it. I did graduate from college. I partook in a lot of extracurriculars while I was there as well. And after I graduated, I met a boy, and he was my party buddy, and we definitely partied the same way. We ended up moving out here to Las Vegas. He moved first, and I followed him, and we got married. And if anyone had experience with marrying their party buddy, it usually does not end well. That's about the lesson that I learned from that. He was not a nice man. He still is not a nice man. But, you know, we did the same things together. When I was 30, I decided we should have a baby. And we did, and that was great. And I remember everyone saying, after you have a baby, you know, you'll be able to have like one glass of wine and you'll be buzzed. And that was definitely not my experience. You know, I managed to go through the whole pregnancy without drinking. My alcoholism and my drug use had not surpassed the point where I had no choice in the matter. I gave up the drugs because that was crazy with a kid, right? You can't be doing drugs all the time. And then that's kind of when alcohol kicked in, you know, and really became my go-to. The marriage was not going well at all. Shocking. And my solution was we should have another baby. Like, this just sounded like a great plan to me. I also, at that point, remember thinking, I have been drinking way too much. Like, I was sort of starting to cross that line where I was drinking earlier in the day, right? It was definitely every night, right? There was no question on that. But it was starting to get earlier and earlier. And so, again, I thought, you know, we'll have another baby, the marriage will be better, and I will stop drinking, so everything will just kind of go back to the way it was. I was really sick during that next pregnancy. Like, if it could have gone wrong, it went wrong. And I truly believe that was my higher power's way of making sure that I did not pick up during that pregnancy. Because I had cravings, but man, like, it just, my body could not do it. It could not do it. And when my son was born, just because of a lot of complications, it was really touch and go for the first few days. And he's now 14, so he survived it, but that was probably one of the more traumatic experiences that I've been through in my life. When we got home, same thing, I'm like, I can drink now and I'll have a glass of wine, it'll be back to where it was. And I remember I finished the entire bottle and like basically almost felt nothing. The drinking was on at that point, and it became like a daily waking up in the morning, waiting for my husband at the time to leave for work. It started more simply than that. The marriage, having kids does not save a marriage, right? Especially when one person's, really abusive in the relationship and they have no intention of stopping the abuse. So I found if I had a little bit of a buzz going on when he got home from work, it was much easier to deal with him. And that very quickly, within a matter of maybe a month or two, escalated into, as soon as he left, me drinking. And so I became the mom at play dates where I had my water bottle, but it was full of vodka, I remember, God forbid, the kids would ask to have a sip of my water bottle, and I'd be like, no, like panic, would set in because I can't let them drink it. I drove drunk with my children every single day. I'm absolutely not proud of that, but that is the reality of the situation. It was my oldest's, it was his 4th birthday. And we were gonna go to Chuck E. Cheese, and that's when my husband met us there, and that's when he realized I was drunk, and I had obviously clearly driven the kids to Chuck E. Cheese. And so this started like a 9-month, well, maybe it was like 6 months, a 6-month game of, really trying to hide it, right? Because I couldn't not drink. I didn't really want to, but I had no other option, and I really didn't know how to stop. So let's see, some of the things that we tried in my household. My ex-husband now would give me those surveys, are you an alcoholic? And I could go through all the questions. And the truth is, if you answer yes to like 2 or more questions, you probably have a problem. Well, I always thought if I could answer no to at least 1 question, I was fine. And my question was legal problems. I had no legal problems. And you guys, I held on to that as long as I could. Like, there were no legal problems, and that made me, not an alcoholic. he would order breathalyzers on Amazon. But the thing was, I was a stay-at-home mom, so when the package would come, I would very carefully open it, and I'd either bend or snip a little wire inside there, and I'd put it all back in the package. And he legitimately was like, "God, these things, they just don't work. They're so sensitive." And so then he got creative, and he ordered. God, I don't even know what it was, but it was like these rocks, and they were like in a tube, and you're supposed to like blow into it. And if the rocks turn yellow, that means you are intoxicated, right? And I will tell you, I could make some killer arguments on how those rocks were not yellow. Like, it just, Eventually, I ended up in therapy. He got me a gym membership. That was great because I had another place to, have someone watch the kids in the play center, and I could drink at the gym. So it was awesome. And then that clearly didn't work. So then I went to therapy, and my drinking never came up, but we did talk a lot about what a horrible husband he was, and how horrible my life was, right? Eventually, when like the jig was really up, I ended up having to go to an IOP program. And again, that was because I just needed to get everyone off my back. Like, I remember my parents coming over and my dad grabbing me by the shoulders and like kind of shaking me and being like, "You have to stop drinking," And my only thought in my head was, "Oh, great, now I have to hide it from him too." It was not like, maybe he's onto something, maybe I do have a problem, There was no concept of that whatsoever. When I did the IOP program, it was nice. I did not have to say I was an alcoholic. I just simply had to say what my drug of choice was. So I was Megan. I like to drink. And that worked. I had no intention of staying sober, but I did detox. I went through a medical detox. And I think I ended up with about 10 or 11 days. And I was feeling a lot better, right? So I could still go to this IOP program, but I could still kind of drink. So it worked out well, because I was gone in the evenings when my husband at the time was home. So I didn't have to be around him. So I could go a little intoxicated, and, I'm assuming they all knew, but I like to think that they didn't. The last time I drank, I was dropping my 4-year-old off at a summer camp. It was like one of those ones, went from like 8 to 11 in the morning. And I had my 1-year-old with me, and I was gonna go to the Children's Museum with him and hang out and then come back. What I remember is, I know I made it to the Children's Museum. I do remember peeing in the parking structure because I really had to go to the bathroom. There's like snippets of being in the Children's Museum, and when I left, I was going to pick up my other son. I got in a car accident. I swerved lanes. I hit a commercial vehicle. No one was hurt. No clue how that happens. My car was almost totaled. I ended up with over $15,000 in damage. It was like the fist of God came down from the sky and just went right down the side of my car. The car I hit did not have one scratch on it. And my insurance company actually questioned what really happened. Even though the guy that I hit called the cops because, I was staggering, and I think I took my empty bottles, and first thing I did was open my door and I threw them all in the bushes, like no one's gonna see it, right? So they called the cops, and they came, they arrested me. The officer wrote child endangerment on my ticket and then drew a single line through it. And the only reason that happened is because I did not need that charge in order for me to get sober. Not me, but my higher power knew that for me. I called my dad. Of course, that was my first phone call because my husband was gonna be really mad at me, and I didn't want to deal with him. So my dad came and picked up my son while they took me off to jail. While I was in jail, I just remember thinking, like, don't you know who I am? Like, where I'm from, like who I things I've done. This is not me. I do not belong here. And I was kind of ornery and probably not very pleasant to be around. and I'm sure that attributed to the fact that I couldn't bail out until pretty much almost the next day. So I got to sleep in a cell, I got to wear the little jumpsuit, I got to bend over and cough and have that whole experience. And when I got out the next day, my first thought was, I have legal problems now. And it like hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my God, that was the one thing that I was holding on to. I had no legal problems. And the only thing I could come up with was my drinking that might be causing some issues. Like, I still wasn't willing to say I was an alcoholic, but I was running out of excuses, like, that I could tell myself at that point. We spent the next day driving around and looking at rehabs, and I remember we went to Solutions, and it was co-ed, and my first thought was, that guy's really hot. And I immediately was like, this is not gonna work. I cannot go to this place. My marriage is hanging by a thread, and the last thing I need is to, be with men as well. So we went to a women's recovery home called We Care, and at the time I thought it was in this really ghetto neighborhood, and it was a crappy little house, and all these sad women in there, and I'm like, this is where I deserve to be. I hated myself, I wanted to die, and this seemed like the best fit. So I said, I'll be back tomorrow, right? Because you can't do anything the same day. You just can't. So I went home, I packed, and the next day I did go back, and when I walked into the house, I walked literally right through the door. The director at the time asked me two of the most ridiculous questions ever. The first one was, are you powerless over alcohol? And I'm like, I'm here, aren't I? Like, I didn't even want to drink the other day. Like, I just got out of jail. I think, yes, there's something going on, and I really can't control my drinking. And the second question was, is your life unmanageable? And I literally was like, this woman is so dumb. And I'm like, did you not just hear what I said? Like, clearly my life is unmanageable. I had zero knowledge of the steps of alcoholism, of anything. And it took some time for me to realize she just did my first step, like right when I walked across. And I am now forever grateful for those two simple questions. Even though in the moment I thought they were absolutely ridiculous, because I thought my predicament was pretty obvious that those questions were yes, but she made me actually say it out loud. We Care saved my life. I attribute it absolutely without a doubt, and I always joke that I caught alcoholism in there. So if you're not familiar with We Care, there's no therapists, there's no doctors, there's no detox. It is a women's recovery home for alcoholics, run by alcoholics. Everyone's in the program. They pretty much shove AA down your throat for like 30 days. And for someone like me, I needed that. When I remember my first day, they were watching a movie, and I was sitting on the couch. I came in late because I had to do my check-in, and I asked one of the girls in the house, I'm like, what's this movie? And it was the Lois Wilson story, right? And I'm like, oh. Like a few minutes go by, I'm like, who is that? And they're like, Bill W.'s wife. I'm like, right, of course. And, a few more minutes, I'm like, who is Bill W.? Like, literally knew nothing. But I learned so much about the program. We averaged, every day we started with, oh my gosh, it's 6 in St. Louis. Wow, I just spaced on the name of the 7 a.m. meeting. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. Anyway, we would go to that meeting, and then We Care would have a 10 a.m. women's only meeting, and the women would come in and they would share their experience, strength, and hope. Then usually we would go to either a noon or a 1 p.m. meeting or have a workshop, and then there was always an evening meeting that we went to. So it was a lot of AA, but it also enabled me to meet a lot of women. And when I got out of that house, I felt comfortable going to any meeting, because I usually ran into someone I knew. I understood what the format was like, and it wasn't this foreign, scary concept to me. I skipped over this, but when I was in the IOP program, they suggested I go to an AA meeting. So I did. and I was not like you guys. I didn't understand anything that was being said. I picked up a sponsor, whatever that meant. And so when I was in We Care, it gave me an opportunity to really understand like how the meetings work. One of my pivotal moments in my recovery was a woman sat in We Care and she shared how her kids used to get in the way of her drinking. And I was horrified, like, how can a mom say that out loud? You know, my other thought was, well, my kids definitely got in the way of my drinking, but like, you can't express that. You can't say that in front of a room of people. And I was shocked because all the women were like, oh yeah, you know, nodding in agreement. No one like ran her out. No one called her bad names. And it was in that moment, I'm like, maybe this is a safe place. You know, maybe you can be honest in this arena. And that, I feel like, was the moment where I kind of started to soften a little bit. Basic concepts in AA, especially when I was in We Care, oh my gosh, you guys, I was hopelessly lost. Remember, they kept saying one day at a time, and I was crying one day, and the director's like, what's wrong? I'm like, how am I ever gonna plan a vacation, you know? Because if you live life one day at a time, and she was like, dear God, Megan, you know, just, it's with alcohol, you know? And there were other times I was crying because how, you know, am I gonna get through my kids' weddings without the champagne toast? And, you know, she gently pointed out to me, my kids were 4 and 1 at the time, you know? And so just the challenges that I foresaw were, you know, ridiculous basically, but they were very real to me in the moment. When I got out of We Care, I went home, and I think I got about a 12-hour reprieve from my husband at the time before he just, you know, he laid into me. He was mad, and honestly, he had a right to be mad. Like, I do not fault him for that at all. My only thing I could do was throw myself into AA. I went to as many meetings as I could. My husband at the time basically put my kids in full-time preschool and daycare and said I was not allowed to be alone with them. And my sponsor said, take this time and go to as many meetings as you can, build your foundation, because eventually you are gonna get those kids back, you know, and it's gonna be a little more challenging. So do what you need to do now. As my first year, as I got into it, some of the clarity around my life and my choices and my responsibility in my current situation, specifically with my marriage, kind of started to come to fruition, and I started to get some clarity. The steps helped immensely. If you are new, or even if you have time and you have never done the steps, I highly, highly encourage you to do them. It will change your life. The first step for me was very easy because I did it when I crossed the threshold coming into We Care. The second one was a little more challenging, you know, developing this concept of a higher power and turning my life and my will over to it, 2 and 3. I never had a hard time believing in God. I just didn't think that God could help me. I was a Catholic growing up, and you go through the priest to get to God, and that's just how it is, you know, and I'm just like a nothing. God does not care about me, nor does he have time to deal with me. So that one took some time. I hear people share that their obsession to drink left them from their first meeting of AA. And my question I always want to ask them is, what meeting did you go to, you know? Because that was also not my experience. And this is really where my higher power kicked in. My prayers were so simple in the beginning. The only thing in the morning was, please remove the obsession. I didn't even say, keep me sober today. I just said, remove the obsession. And at night, if I got another day, I just said, thank you. I refused to get on my knees because that was weird and, you know, I guess beneath me, you know. It was just crazy to say that out loud now. But I think I had about 6 or 7 months, and I had this realization that I had not thought about drinking for a couple days. And that was my first miracle and sign that this program actually was working. every single day it was like white knuckling it. And when I realized, like when that kind of stopped, it was just changed my whole perception of everything and kind of changed my daily life. Step 4, that one was fun. I didn't really want to do it. And that was the only time my sponsor really yelled at me and told me, she gave me a couple weeks and then basically said, like, get the damn pen and the damn piece of paper and sit your ass down and do it. And I had pages and pages and pages. I put myself on the resentment list. God was on it. Like, if you had ever crossed my path, your name was on there somewhere. And it was funny because when I had read the book while I was in We Care, and there were a lot of parts of it where I just was like, this isn't me, flip, 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 and skip forward a couple pages. And I didn't understand the book and how it related to me and my actions until my sponsor went through it with me page by page. And that's when it came alive. So with the control issues and being the director and, trying to control the actors and everything, I did not see that until I did my 4th step. And the 4th step was horrifying because I assumed I would write all this stuff down and she would say, my gosh, Megan, like, I understand why you did what you did. Like, I would have done the same things, And that was clearly not what happened. I learned that I had a role in everything. It literally humbled me to my knees. It broke me, honestly. I got 0 relief from step 4 and step 5. There was none. 6 and 7, you're going through your defects, asking God or, whoever your higher power is to remove them from you. That one didn't have a lot of meaning until I got a little further down the road in sobriety. It was more just going through those actions. Then we hit 8 and 9. I remember my sponsor said, take step 4 and write a list of everyone that you owe an amend to. And I'm like, why would I have to look at step 4? And she said, well, those are the people you owe amends to. And I literally burst into tears and said, quote unquote, I would not have told you all of that if if I had known that you were going to make me go apologize to all of them. In case you guys haven't done that, there's a little spoiler alert right there. But I will tell you this, when I started with step 9, every single amends, I got relief. It was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was better than a drink, better than a drug. I could stand a little straighter. I could look people in the eyes, like going to friends and saying, hey, remember that play date? You lost like a bottle of pills? Well, guess what? You didn't really lose them. Like, I probably stole them. Where I watched your kids while they were drunk and all kinds of crazy stuff that is really hard to say to people. But, it changed me in such like a profound way where it enabled me to own up to the things I had done. And I feel like it was a new level of acceptance of where my alcoholism had taken me and what I was capable of while I was drinking. Because these are things that I am definitely not proud of. I had a couple lists for step 9. I had the one where, yeah, sure, no problem, I can do these amends. And then, the one that was like, this one's going to be a little harder. And then I had the never in a million years will I ever do it. And I was told, the never in a million years, I could just set that one aside for the time being, focus on the other 2 lists, because, one, I had to fly to Oregon, another one I had to fly to Colorado. They were not all close in my backyard. So, it took some time to get through those lists. And where I am today, I don't even think I said my sobriety date. I'm so sorry, but my sobriety date is 7/11/2013. So I've got like 12 and a half years right now. And probably around the 4 or 5 year mark, all that anger that I had for those people in the will never make an amends list had dissipated. It was gone. And what I have come to realize is I no longer was expecting them to apologize to me. I had let go of the anger that I felt towards them and was able to really just look at my role and my part and go into it with no expectations. Again, for me, that took time. That was not instantaneous. So if you've got some of those amends out there that you're never going to do, I hate to inform you, but time will help you take care of that. And eventually you will be able to do them. 10, 11, and 12. 10 is, I like 10 because it allows you to just, fix things like in the moment. I had an issue, this was like 2 years ago at work. And you guys, I literally screamed at a coworker. She was wrong, I'll tell you that. But my reaction was not right by any stretch of the imagination. And, right after it happens, I felt good for about a second, and then you go into that incomprehensible demoralization. And I just couldn't focus on anything else except for the fact that I needed to fix this situation. And I did, and I fixed it right away. And that for me is step 10. Living with that discomfort is not an option for me anymore. I do not enjoy it. When I was newly sober, my emotions were all over the place. And I remember one time, I think I had about 3 months, and I got really angry. I don't even remember what it was. It felt so comforting, and I just wanted to sit in it because I missed it. And it took a couple hours, and I finally called my sponsor and was like, okay, I'm angry, I got to get rid of this. And I will tell you today, when I am angry, I do not get that comfort anymore. It is now uncomfortable, and I do not enjoy it. I don't want to live my life like that anymore. Anything that disturbs my peace and serenity, it's got to go. I've got to fix it and fix myself. And that's, whether it's me removing someone from my life or whether it's just my perception of the situation, I've got to change it. When I was coming up on a year sober, my husband at the time, gave me a couple ultimatums of me moving out, leaving the kids. There was one where he wanted us to get divorced and we would split the finances and then work on the marriage. And the third one was just flat out divorce. And I've never picked the word divorce so fast in my life. And I was actually mad at him. I developed a resentment because he did this 1 week before I turned 1. And I was told not to make any major decisions in the first year. And my sponsor assured me it was okay. But for me, getting divorced was the best thing that could have ever happened to myself and my kids. And without getting sober and getting some clarity on the situation, I couldn't have done it. I absolutely, from the bottom of my soul, do not blame that man for me being an alcoholic. If I wasn't an alcoholic, I would have been able to face the challenges in the marriage and get divorced a long time before then. Instead, the marriage was bad and I chose to drink. And that is what makes me an alcoholic today. I don't have the anger for him that I used to. I feel for him, and he is currently in very active addiction right now. And over the last probably 6 months, my heart actually goes out to him. And I never thought I would say that, you guys, ever. And it's just amazing how the perception changes. In 2023, my mom, we moved her into a memory care facility. She has dementia, and 2 weeks later, my dad passed away completely unexpected. My dad was my kid's dad. And when that happened, my oldest was 14. And it was a really dark time. He was suicidal, very depressed, and there were a couple hospitalizations. And I stayed as close to AA as I could. My challenge was I was very angry at God, and I stopped praying. Now, my sponsor, I told her I was not going to pray. I absolutely said, I can't do it right now. And I love my sponsor. She has a lot of time. And she said, when my mom passed away, I stopped praying too. She said, eventually it's going to come back. Either you'll get in enough pain or something's going to happen and your ability to do that will come back. it probably went on for almost a year and a half. And last January, I finally called my sponsor and I just said, I am dying of alcoholism. And what caused that was my son got better. He got better and I no longer had that to focus on. I no longer had that anger anymore at, how dare you take this man from us and cause my son to go through these experiences. And I started praying again, and it became very different than it was before. My spiritual connection today is a lot stronger. I recently put my mom on hospice. I don't have anger. I still am able to pray through it. There have been, my oldest had another mental health challenge last fall. I did not stop praying. I have been able to accept that things happen for me and not to me. I don't know what the reason was for all of these experiences that have happened over the last few years, but I know at some point it will become, it is part of my story, but hopefully it will help someone else, and that's the only thing I can follow through with on that. But I just have to trust that there's a God, and it's not me, and there's a reason why these experiences, I have to go through them. During this time, there was someone who gave me like the simplest prayer, and this was specifically last fall, and I hang on to this every day. And it just said, God, remove from me the desire to know the next move and replace it with trust in you. I know that I don't know what the next right thing is. I know that I have to ask God for that direction. For some reason, the way that this was worded just struck a chord with me and made perfect sense. And, you have these light bulb moments in this program where things happen, someone says something, someone shares something, and it's like everything just clicks together. When I was going through kind of the darker time, and I remember going to a meeting and I was angry and I was upset, and there was a guy that was sitting next to me, and just out of nowhere he just looked at me and he's like, our primary purpose is just to help another alcoholic. Like, we weren't even having a conversation at all, and I needed to hear that though and be remembered, like that is my purpose, and if I can focus on that, everything is going to fall into place. It might not look exactly like I want it with a big old bow wrapped up, but it will be as it's supposed to be. And I do firmly believe that everything will work out. I just don't know what that looks like. It's the old homage that people say, I might not have everything that I want, but I'll have everything that I need. And I still don't fully understand that, I'll be honest, but I do know that as long as I stay close to these rooms and stay close to my higher power, it will work out. Step 11, I struggle with meditation. It's really hard for me to sit still. It's really hard for me to sit with my own thoughts. I'm better at it than I was 12 and a half years ago, but it still is an area of growth. I focus on the prayer portion of that, and that is where I get my strength today. Step 12, in my world, being of service looks many different ways. I currently do not have any sponsees, but I have taken multiple women through the steps over the years. I accept that, God just hasn't put anyone in my path that I'm supposed to take through the book right now, and that's okay. In the beginning, when I first got sober, there was another lady, and we had the same exact sobriety date. She started getting all these sponsees right away, and I was so mad. I'm like, how come I don't have anyone, right? First of all, no one wanted what I had my first couple years. That was really the truth. Like, I was a mess. But I remember someone asked me, and they're like, do you really want to sit with someone and like take them through the book? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to have to call someone or answer the phone. And they're like, that's probably why, you're not being asked to sponsor anyone. So it was kind of funny. And now in hindsight, I'm like, absolutely, that was why. But it was all selfish and self-centered, right? I wanted to look good. I wanted to have women that I was helping, even though I didn't want to do the work. And so it was around 3 years when I started getting women that were asking me to take them through the book. And that is a magical experience. If you ever get the opportunity to take someone else through the steps in the book and share your experience, like, you grow from it and you get closer to this program, and it really is a magical experience. Giving people rides, like, that is a beautiful thing. I didn't have a driver's license for months, and let me tell you, I never missed a meeting. And it was extremely humbling to have to ask other women, you know, hey, are you going to go to a meeting tomorrow? Can you pick me up? Like, I will go anywhere at any time. Like, the flexibility in my schedule, I wasn't working, I didn't have my kids, and you know, I had no excuses like, well, I have to sit on the couch and do nothing during that time. So people step up though, and they help you in ways. And I can honestly remember every single person who ever gave me a ride during that time, because I was so grateful that people were willing to do that, because that was not the world I was living in before I got sober. Having commitments, that's important. My home group is the Summerlin Speaker Meeting. It's a Friday night speaker group. And that was the very first meeting that I ever went to in AA before I got sober. And I kept that same sponsor who, you know, I cried to and told her how I didn't have a problem and all of that. And when I got out of We Care, I found her, and she just said, you know, I thought she was going to be so mad at me, but she literally just said, I'm glad you're alive, and, you know, I'm glad that you went through We Care. And I'm like, will you still sponsor me? And she said, yes. And it's interesting because we feel that we've done these things that are so bad,